Meanwhile, aid agencies warn that the continued fighting is likely to trigger more displacements in Chad. It comes as at least 20,000 people who escaped the conflict-ridden country seek refuge in the country. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees expects a further 100,000 refugees to flee to Chad from conflict zones. The wave of arrivals places an additional burden on Chad's limited resources, which were already strained by hosting 400,000 refugees who fled earlier conflict in Sudan. Now, foreign embassies in Sudan are moving with haste to evacuate their nationals stranded. There are also some concerns raised over the whereabouts of former Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir, who some say has been released from prison during the conflict which broke out a week ago. Let's speak now to Professor Jok Madut Jok from Syracuse University. Very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for your time. With a worsening humanitarian crisis, food, petrol and medicine are running out. What is your assessment of the situation in Sudan?
Yes, the situation in Sudan is extremely dire on many accounts. The fighting is continuing despite the ceasefire, which has been declared and was increased for another 72 hours, and yet residents of Khartoum are under fire still. As the militias, the Rapid Support Force continues to seek to take over army garrisons and to collect food and from the citizens, and there is rampant looting, and people are holed up in their homes, running out of supplies, no water, no electricity, no food. The food stalls are all emptying out. And so the situation is bound to be very, very serious if this ceasefire doesn't allow people to bring in aid and to seek health care, as health facilities have nearly all come to a standstill, with the medical personnel being in danger of being taken by the RSF to go and treat their wounded. So, by all accounts, the situation in Khartoum and other parts of Sudan, especially nearby towns to Khartoum, is extremely volatile and dangerous, and is bound to increase to become a serious humanitarian crisis as days go by.
Yeah. Professor Jok, this is a conflict that's already left more than 500 people dead. In the midst of it, countries like South Africa and others, of course, are evacuating citizens. Is there any sense of predicting, forecasting what could happen as the ceasefire ends?
There is no predicting anything at all right now. And in fact, perhaps even the evacuation of the international community, the diplomats, embassy staff, UN and NGO workers fleeing the capital city of Sudan really leaves a situation where nobody will even bear witness to the tragedy that is unfolding in Sudan. Now, of course, people, no one can blame people for seeking safety, and you can only help if you are safe. And so no one can fault the international agencies from seeking refuge in Port Sudan or in Kassala or in Wad Madani, the second biggest city south of Khartoum. Nobody knows what will happen. Should this ceasefire end and no agreement? To that effect, the international community, especially IGAD, the agency that is for the Horn of Africa, Intergovernmental Agency for Development, has put in a request to the main warring parties, the leaders of RSF, General Daglo, and the leader of Sudan Armed Forces, General Burhan, to try to sit down and talk peace. And they are now the South Sudan government, the government of Ethiopia, Uganda, and Kenya have put in a request to these leaders to try to seek a settlement rather than try to achieve a decisive military victory, which is nearly impossible. So in the next day or two, we will see whether they will come to the table. General Burhan has, in principle, agreed to talk. General Daglo has not responded to the request.
There's also been concerns raised over the possible whereabouts of former Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir, who some say may have been released from prison. What is the latest on the ground and your understanding of that situation?
Our understanding is that he is definitely been taken out of the prison. One of the people who was in prison with him and was one of the first two people to be indicted by the International Criminal Court with him, somebody called Ahmed Haroun, former governor of South Kordofan, who was also accused of genocide in Darfur, has made a voice statement which is circulating in the media to the effect that they have been moved out of the Kobar prison, which is in Bahri, Khartoum, and they have been taken to a place of safety. And he was talking about the fact that they have not escaped. They are just going relocated because of their safety, but that they will await any justice system that will come to fore in the future, in the near future. Should the situation stabilize, the justice system can still come and get them, he said. But they are out. He himself, Haroun, Omar al-Bashir, Ali Usman Taha, the person who was vice president, and Abdurrahim, the person who was the Minister of Defense, all of them indicted for war crimes, all of them imprisoned when their government was overthrown in 2019. But now they are out.
So what would the major concerns be, especially in the wake of the hostility with them being essentially out?
But by being out, more and more people are now beginning to suspect that it was the National Congress Party, al-Bashir's party, that actually ignited this conflict from behind bars by talking to their supporters, the Islamist groups within Sudan. So the fear is that if they find a way to be mobile, once again, as they are suspected to be now, then they will join this conflict and they will try to restore their government, which was overthrown in a popular uprising in 2019. So that's the fear, that they might find ways to try to come back to power, but there is no clarity as to how they will do that, because right now what is going on is that the army of Sudan is engaged in a pitched battle against the paramilitary, the RSF, both of whom used to be one. And in fact, the Sudan army created the RSF, and now the RSF is coming for their neck because of a recent attempt to merge them with an effort being coordinated by the government of South Sudan to try to merge the army and to restore a civilian government in the end, and to hold elections at some point. And this merger of the two armies made General Daglo of the RSF unwary about, unsure about his fate. Should he become submerged and subordinated to Burhan?
As you mentioned, the possibility of holding elections at some point. Looking at the current situation, the harrowing affair that's occurring in Sudan, what would an ideal agreement look like in your terms?
Well, at the moment, first things first, an ideal agreement now would have to start with a permanent cessation of hostilities, a permanent ceasefire, so that the population of Sudan is not exposed to the dangers that are facing them right now, issues of healthcare, issues of food, and possibility of the conflict flaring up in all parts of Sudan. Particularly now we are hearing stories of fighting going on in Darfur, and which will send a lot of people into refuge in Chad or Central African Republic or South Sudan. So you need to stop that fighting first, and then After that, you agree as kind of a settlement between the two main parties now, and that settlement could spell out the future in the next year or two, including the possibility of merging the army, setting up an interim government, and that this interim government will look at the constitution of Sudan, and on the basis of that constitution, you could hold elections down the road, perhaps in 2 years' time. That might be the sequence of events that are necessary for now.
Very well. Thank you so much for your time.